Tell us why you think ABR is the greatest apologetics ministry of all time. Oh boy. Uh, oh, you are yanking my chain tonight, aren't you? Well, thank you very much for the super chat. I will say that ABR is the greatest apologetics ministry of in its capacity to self-aggrandize. I mean, nobody. I mean, in all honesty, they have done probably the most thorough job of almost any apologetics ministry to promote its own agenda. I mean, they've been incredibly successful in this regard. Now, greatest of all time. It is. It as I said, it's the greatest at delivering its message, and there's actually a serious side to this. So I know you meant this to yank my chain, but there is something interesting here that we should talk about, which is the fact that ABR is mostly run by missionaries. It's mostly run. It's not run by apologists. It's not run by scholars. It's run by missionaries. Because it's run by missionaries, they know how to get their message out there. And so they have been incredibly effective about this. This is why they've influenced the American culture so much. At least American Christian culture so much. Is because they've gone from church to church, seminary to seminary, denomination to denomination for 60 years, spreading their message. And they did it all at the grassroots level. That's an incredible accomplishment. You know, say what you will about their lousy theology, their terrible biblical exegesis, their dishonest treatment of the archaeological data. You know, all that aside, they have done an incredibly good job of getting their message out. Much, much better than Addison Weir. More influential than Answers in Genesis? In some respects, yes. Okay? I'll post that up there. More influential than Answers in Genesis? Oh, yeah. Okay? And here's why I say this. They did it without drawing attention to themselves. Now think about this. Think about this for a moment. Answers in Genesis, they come rolling in, and you know they tell you they're answers in Genesis. They're gonna put up Ken Ham. You know, whatever local chapter they do, they're gonna put up Ken Ham. Ken Ham is the face of Answers in Genesis. Okay. Answers in Genesis really wouldn't function without Ken Ham. You can say the same thing about Reasons to Believe. You know, Reasons to Believe. You know, they're not going to. I mean, the face of Reasons to Believe is Hugh Ross. Without Hugh Ross, there's really no reasons to believe. You know, even say, like for example, the much now scandalized Ravi Zacharias Ministries, International Ministries. It's, all these are pulpit ministries. They're pulpit ministries. They have one central figure, your keystone figure, at the center of it, whether it's Ken Ham, Hugh Ross, Ravi Zacharias, and there's a limit to how much those guys can appeal, because they're just one man, and they're having to go, they're going to may pull in like a stadium of people at some point, but they're not going to be able to do that all that often. In the case of, say, Associates for Biblical Research, there's no key man. It's a distributed model. Okay? Any one of the Associates for Biblical Research can go to a church of 1,000 people on any particular Sunday and present what they believe. Now multiply that by 20 people. 20 associates. They're going from church to church all across North America. That's an incredibly effective missionary model. Much more effective than Answers in Genesis. Sure, ABR is not as well known. I mean, as I said, Answers in Genesis, you automatically associate that with Ken Ham. Reasons to Believe, you automatically associate that with Hugh Ross. Who do you associate Associates for Biblical Research with? There's no key man. I mean, you got some that are more famous than others, like Bryant Wood and Scott Stripling, but Associates for Biblical Research has been very, very careful not to turn ABR into a pulpit ministry. Yeah, like for example, when we started doing our critiques of patterns of evidence, we didn't even know that people from ABR had been working on those patterns of evidence movies until we looked into this. I mean, at that point in time, when I did the first critique, their content consultant was Titus Kennedy, among others. And, we didn't really know who Titus Kennedy was at the time. He was a relatively unknown. Well, we also found out later on, even though he's not credited, Scott Stripling also worked on that film. So, ABR has got its hands in a lot of cookie jars and does not draw attention to itself. That's power. Yeah, a little bit like the Medicis in Italy, right? Yeah, sure. But, that's power. If you can influence the culture without exposing yourself. They're manipulating things behind the scenes. They're influencing people of money and power. Yeah. And they sort of hide behind these people of money and power to enforce their doctrines. So in some ways, ABR has been incredibly successful, much more so than Answers in Genesis. Answers in Genesis has sort of, really, as I said, it's so public that people are sort of, going, I hate what they stand for. I'll write books against them. So you get people writing books against Answers in Genesis. Nobody is writing books against ABR. No one's writing books against ABR because they're not exposing themselves to the same high-profile criticisms. They're just influencing people. That's a kind of success. Yeah. And they've been doing this for 60 years. 60 years. They've been doing it longer than Answers in Genesis. And there's no sort of indication that it's going to stop either. We'll see what happens once Ken Ham dies. Once Ken Ham dies, let's see what happens to the Creation Park, their dinosaur park. A lot of these pulpit ministries fall apart as soon as the key man dies. A lot of them do. They just can't sustain themselves after the death of the key man. Yeah. I know he replaced him. How long is that going to last? How long is that going to last without Hugh Ross? Hugh Ross is still a figurehead at Reasons to Believe. And I know
everybody still.
Yeah. We identify Reasons to Believe with Hugh Ross. Fazell does not have the same charisma as Hugh Ross does. So, again, how long is this going to last? See, ABR, all ABR has to do to keep going is add more associates. That's all ABR has to do. It does not have to have a key man. And it doesn't. I mean, it has... the way ABR is kind of structured internally is kind of strange, too. They have a president who's really not a high-profile guy. They also have, say, more of a spiritual leader. This would be in Bryant Wood, they would name us, whoever was the spiritual leader of ABR would name us, who didn't necessarily hold an executive position. He would be sort of the guy that keeps people on track within ABR, and then they would name a successor. Okay. And for a while, that successor of Bryant Wood was Douglas Petrovich, until he fell out of favor with ABR. He got into a real nasty fight with him, and that's, we still don't know what happened. But there was some falling out with him, with Petrovich at the Bible Seminary that sort of resulted in him quitting or being forced out. And it's looking like he's on real bad terms with them. So that's probably it'll probably go to somebody else now. But that's sort of how ABR keeps itself organized. Is it's sort of the spiritual leader of ABR appoints a successor, and that successor, everybody at ABR knows who it is. So right now, that whole thing is up in the air at the moment, but they'll appoint another one. Possibly Mark Hassler is probably my guess for this. Maybe Titus Kennedy. You never know. So as far as greatest apologetics organization ever, well, ABR's in the running. ABR's in the running, especially for their message.